Hello, everyone. I am Brennan and Storr, host of the Ghost Story Guys podcast.
And I'm Joseph Comeau, host of In Search of Ghosts.
And this is Weird Together, where we talk about the latest and greatest in paranormal entertainment because we're weird and you're weird. Why not be weird together?
Why not? Weird Together is part of the Ghost Story Guys family, which also includes the podcast Mysteries and Monsters, Luke Lore, and Book of the Dead.
That's the devil horns you can't. Anyways, my spatial awareness is not great, Joseph, is what I'm saying. It's not great. Yeah. Walk the yellow line. Well, take me to jail now. It's easier this way. How are you doing, Joseph?
I'm okay. It's kind of a crazy time, end of the semester. We were talking about this a little before show, but that's life, right? First world problems, having stuff to do.
Yeah, that is true enough. That is true enough. And we get to talk about aliens tonight. And when is it not a party when you're talking about aliens?
Good times,
When I'm invited to the party and I start talking about aliens, that's when it stops becoming a party and I'm invited to leave.
Yes, I think I remember that happening.
That's why I you and I were saying, no, we'll talk about, let's get going. We'll get to it. And this time around, the film we're talking about is the 2018 documentary Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers.
The documentary, directed by Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, profiles famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, figure Bob Lazar, who claimed he once worked for the U.S. government in Area 51, reverse engineering alien technology, including aircraft. He also claims to have seen evidence of an anti-gravity drive powered by something called Element 115.
Yes. And before anything, let's just get it straight up right now. We are not experts on the UFO phenomenon. We are not experts on Bob Lazar. We are going to be talking about those things, but primarily we're going to be talking about the film itself. So I will, however, send you to places and people who can inform you much better than we can about all those things. And since this is a paranormal documentary, I guess we should just get out there and talk about the spooky stuff. All right. So, like we said, this documentary is about Bob Lazar. It is about Area 51. I mean, primarily it's about Bob Lazar. And, we'll get into it the more we talk about it. But we can't talk about this film without talking about aliens. Now, there are going to be those among you who are going to roll your eyes so hard that your head rolls off down the street. And that's fine. That's fine. But at this point in human history, there is no denying that something is happening in the skies. So we're just going to start right there. We're going to say, if you're expecting us to spend the whole time going, aliens, am I right? It's not going to happen. The U.S. government has admitted the existence of ATIP, or the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. They have footage of UFOs. They're not saying they're aliens. They're just saying they are unidentified flying objects, or unidentified aerial phenomena is the new term, UAP. So bear in mind as we go on through this, we're going to be talking a little bit about the stuff. We're not saying little green men. We're not saying little gray men, although there are arguments for both those things. But at this point, as I said, you just can't deny that something is happening. You can argue about what it is, but you can't deny that it is a thing. So that is where we're going to start with aliens. Do you have anything to add to that, Joseph?
Not really, other than, some of the declassified, the Tic Tac, UFO. And there's some really, in the past you'd have the photographs that was it a hubcap or a UFO, there was a lot of, question about that. And there's still, with the advanced technologies and video editing, the ability to, falsify things has gotten, more sophisticated. But the fact that there are these declassified footage from fighter jets and such really lends credibility to what you're talking about, right? That there's something. What it is, so up for debate. But yeah, I think some of that declassified footage is some of the more interesting, compelling recent evidence.
Yeah, and there was No, you know what? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later. That is the spooky stuff. And perfect.
We got a few folks in the chat. I think it's always nice to say hey to some of the folks that are joining us, some folks from Facebook and from YouTube. So this topic is fascinating. I can't watch the full session now, but it'll be on later. Cheers. Appreciate that.
That's awesome, Jackie.
We got James Arnold in here saying, hey guys, and very kind words that loves both our work. So thank you, James. Appreciate you greatly.
Thank you, James. And my friend Justine, Justine from Revelstoke, good friend of mine, known her for a very long time. And thank you for saying hi, Justine. That is so cool.
Yeah.
All right. So before we talk about the film itself, we should talk about baggage because everyone's got it. So you may as well open it up and figure out what's inside. And that's exactly what we're going to do. All right. So I started last time, Joseph. So I almost called you Joe there. J-Dog. J-Bone.
Just don't call me late for dinner. Huh?
Okay, that's the last one of those will be done.
Yeah, right. I'm done.
If you get a Joe for that one. All right, Joe Bear. So what are your thoughts? What's your baggage going into this?
So, I've seen this film a couple times. I'm fascinated by Lazar's accounts. I've seen some interviews with him in other spaces. So my baggage going into this was as someone who wants to believe his accounts. Fascinated by the possibilities. I think some of the technical, descriptions he has of some of the technology and the propulsion systems are fascinating. But my baggage is also having seen the film a few times. Shall we say, the artistic style seemed a little much. Yeah. So my baggage probably was along those lines. And then of course, always the baggage of, at the same time, my academic kind of background, leads me to, always try to, have some sort of skepticism. So it was kind of that tension between skepticism, but also fascinated by the claims.
Right. Fair enough. For me, my baggage going into the film was mostly centered around the director. Jeremy Kenyon Lockyer Corbell, and I think we have a photo here.
We do have. I think what we have is a photo of
There we go. That's a photo of Corbell is on the far right. In the middle is Bob Lazar, and on the left is journalist Bob Knapp, who's sort of like
George Knapp.
George Knapp. Thank you. Yeah. Who is almost like a mentor to Corbell in a lot of ways. Now, I became aware of Jeremy Corbell probably around 2014-ish when I was listening to Mysterious Universe before that show took a hard turn. And he seemed like a really interesting guy. He genuinely had me excited about paranormal phenomenon. I almost reached out, and I'm sure it wouldn't have gone anywhere. But, I was researching my book, A Strange Little Place, at the time, available eventually from Beyond the Free Publishing. And I really thought, oh, shit, this guy, he's talking about window areas, and that's what Revelstoke seems like. He seemed really passionate. And he also had this super cool thing where it seemed like he was always hearing something that he couldn't quite talk about. Like I've got a story, I've got a witness, but they don't want me to talk publicly. I can't really talk about it yet. And that seemed very exciting. Now, over time, I kind of thought, oh, maybe he's full of shit. Maybe he's just, it's very exciting. And especially having seen two of his other three documentaries, his other two documentaries, which I think are both very not good. Especially Hunt for the Skinwalker. I thought that was particularly terrible. I was kind of disappointed in him because it seemed like there wasn't much there. But at the same time, now kind of years later, I'm in that position where I have some pretty cool stories, but I can't share them because, confidentiality, people have asked me not to. So I get it. So my baggage going in was Jeremy Corbell. Why does he have that many names if he's not Sean Connery in Highlander 2?
Oh, right.
So that was my baggage going in. I really want to like the guy because, watching his videos, you and I were talking about this, he seems like a very earnest person. And I don't like to dismiss earnest people. But then there's the film.
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about the rabbit hole we went down.
Okay. Well, this isn't really related to the film, but it is kind of amazing. Back in 06 to I think maybe 08, I don't know. The website is still up, but the pictures are not current. Jeremy Corbell was a sensei for something called quantum jujitsu. And I don't know. I think next time we're going to have to grab video clips of this shit because you really have to see it to believe it. But he was teaching some kind of martial art. And I mean, he is very nimble. And I mean, Jesus Christ, as someone who has difficulty getting up from chairs, I admire that kind of dexterity and that kind of like physical acumen, but holy shit. I don't know that I necessarily buy it as a defensive martial art.
Yeah, I hate to shit on someone's, creative endeavors and pursuits. So I don't want to go lean into this too heavily, but what I would say is, there is a YouTube channel for Quantum Jiu-Jitsu that has 966 subscribers, and there are some videos there. And they would be, if you're interested in Jeremy Corbell, there's some interesting historical documentation of his pre-film career. How about that?
I should say actually I did check that is a sub channel or like a second channel because the main Quantum Jiu-Jitsu channel has something like 9,000 subscribers.
Okay, so there's a bigger one. Nice. Okay,
there is a larger channel. Christ knows why, but it does not make it any more believable. We'll say.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of been all over the place, right? He did martial arts, art. Then film, if you look at his kind of bio, he does fashion design. So a little bit of everything. Yeah. Yeah. So sort of a Renaissance man, if you would, in the very hipster mold. Right.
And again, as someone who has not had a proper job in about 7 years, I can't really shit on him for that. So, this is a very brittle glass house in which I should resist throwing stones. But
yeah, no, I want to like him too. He seems like a very likable guy. So I don't want to totally shit on him in that regard. And yeah.
However, I will say that this film, it sort of fits in with his other documentaries in that I did not like it very much. I found it actually no, that's not true. As a film, I do not think it holds together. I think he's a poor documentarian. But it kind of changed my mind on Bob Lazar. Because I used to think Bob Lazar, I've never been really an alien guy, I'll be honest with you. I kind of thought the whole thing was hooey. But, after researching Strange and then doing the show with Paul, Ghost Story Guys, of course, my co-host Paul Bestel, also the host of Mysteries and Monsters, I've learned a lot from Paul. And he has really provided a lot of context that I did not have before. And now I'm more open to it. And so with knowing that, going in, watching Bob Lazar, I think, okay, I actually believe him more than I did.
Yeah, the claims are fascinating. I mean, there's some critiques, and we can get into that, but the level of detail is pretty interesting. And if it is a hoax, if he is fabricating, these details, they're pretty elaborate, scientifically informed hoaxes, right? So that's something that I think lends towards his account, right?
Yeah. So, and now we'll start describing the film. It opens with narration from the melting wax figure of Diane Keaton. Oh, I'm sorry. My producer's telling me that's Mickey Rourke.
Oh, easy mistake. Right.
Easy mistake. Yeah. Mickey Rourke provides the narration for this film, wearing, as you can see, a hoodie with no shirt on underneath. I can practically smell the body odor coming off that photo.
Right.
And now I am a Mickey Rourke fan.
Okay.
I like the wrestler. As an actor, I'm generally speaking a fan. As a narrator, his contributions to the film were incomprehensible at best and actively offensive to my intelligence at worst. It literally sounded like they just snuck into his house and recorded his sleep paralysis episodes. Or elbowed him in the ribs on the bar stool and just you went with whatever he said next.
Okay.
I didn't push Natalie Wood off that boat.
My theory is they locked him in that recording studio with 3 bottles of tequila, and it had to be tequila. It's definitely tequila. There's no question.
Yeah.
And just recorded him for about 72 hours, and whatever was usable, or even if it wasn't usable, they used it anyway, and that's how they came up with the narration.
I was going to say, usable or not, it went into the film.
Right.
And it was absolutely tequila or mezcal. As a mezcal man, mezcal is alien drink. That's alien fuel.
Okay, that's fair.
That goes into your body, and all of a sudden the stars are all fair game.
But you described it as like slam poetry, and that's not an exaggeration. It's like it's not really a narration as much as it's like kind of this dramatic, poetic sort of, I don't know, undertone that he's, or overtone or something that Corbell's trying to put in there, that kind of these brush strokes, but not really a narration. It's kind of interesting.
If you've ever sat on the hood of your car at night with someone you're trying to fuck, you know exactly what this narration was. Baby, the stars are eternal and forever, and doesn't that make you feel so small but also horny? Like that's kind of what it boils down to. I mean, not to be that guy, but it's very noodly. And I was recently talking to the author James Kennedy, and he had this great phrase, which I'm sure he didn't originate, but I just love it: dorm room philosophy.
Okay.
We were discussing something. He goes, "This is just so much dorm room philosophy. This is a black light in the bong." And a Friday evening after class is finished. This is not very good.
See, what I hear you saying is we all now know what it is like to be romanced by Mickey Rourke.
Hang on. I haven't done this in a while. Sign of the cross. May this be the closest any of us have to come to being romanced by Mickey Rourke.
That's fair.
Who was the big... Never mind. No big spoon jokes. Let's move on. So the film goes from... Again, opens with narration, cosmic horseshit with Mickey Rourke, and then proceeds to what's, I think, an unintentionally comic scene where Jeremy... And Corbell has really placed himself in the documentary, a very kind of gonzo sort of approach, made himself part of the story, which is a colossal mistake. It is a colossal mistake. He is on screen... I think I was watching a video, and they clocked the shots of him on the phone, which makes for very compelling viewing, are like 20 minutes of the film's runtime. Just him on the phone talking to journalist George Knapp. And so the film opens with Corbell in his bathroom with this pink kind of gel on the light, and he's getting texts from Bob Lazar telling him that he's being raided by the FBI. Now, this is kind of being a bitch, but someone pointed this out. If you look at the phone, the date on the phone does not match the date of the text messages popping up on the phone, which are meant to be happening in real time. This is meant to be like, holy shit, the FBI is crawling up my butthole with a flashlight right now. And the messages are old and they don't match. And anyways, it's a small thing. But the raid did happen. Bob Lazar was raided by the FBI in, I believe, 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's right.
And his business was raided. And now Lazar, he has not worked for the government for a very long time. And I know there are people who argue that he never worked for the government, but there does seem to be evidence to suggest that he did. Certainly, there seems to have been an effort to discredit him, which I think makes him more interesting.
Right.
It was said that he didn't go... Which university was it they said he didn't go to?
Was it MIT? I think there was an MIT kind of stint. And then there was an interview with... I'm going to provide you a trigger warning because I know how much you love him, Joe Rogan, where they talked about that. And supposedly he was there under some program where doing something where there was a reason that they didn't document that he was there. And, that it supposedly made sense if you knew the details.
But I mean, he was there. He has turned up in campus photos. He's turned up in, I believe, campus mentions of him in the campus newspaper from the time. So he was definitely there. And he now he sells chemicals. Sort of like industrial, industrial chemicals, or I don't know exactly.
I think it's like research and technology supplies and chemicals, for some, I think some of his clientele, from what I read, are people who are like collect samples of elements and things. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So he was being raided, and the way the film portrays it is that he was being raided as a result of, his involvement with UFO shit, because he has been very vocal about his, what he saw at Area 51. He claims he saw, I don't believe he ever claims he saw an alien itself. Just
so he walked back a claim. There was an early claim, and they show this in the film where years ago in like the 80s, there's a clip of him saying he saw a glance of what he thought was an alien in a room. And then he later walks it back and says he thinks that it was probably a mannequin, but they were sitting it in something to test scale. Yeah.
Right. So his claim mostly is that he worked on reverse engineered alien craft. He said
propulsion systems in particular.
Right. Propulsion systems.
Yeah.
And it's rumored, he has never said, he has never admitted to this, but I don't believe he's ever also denied it outright, that he walked out of the facility with pieces of this element 115. Now, element 115 it does not exist that we know of.
Mhm.
There is something called Moscovium, which is often said to be element 115. I believe Lazar has said, I believe Lazar has said it is not. But the film sort of strongly hints that they were looking for this element one, trace elements or whatever of element 115.
Yeah. There's widespread reporting that the Moscovian is not element 115. But I think the way Corbell kind of gets around that in the film, and even maybe he even kind of teases the information a little bit and leaves it a little bit intentionally vague, is that maybe stabilized Moscovium is that element 115, or they're looking for a stabilized version of it because it's got a half-life of a matter of seconds, I think, and it's in its current form that they have created, right? So I think I think Corbell is still suggesting that it still might be it if it existed in its stabilized form.
I see. Okay. We have a comment here from Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think it makes an interesting point. Jonathan says, if one looks at Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, you can use science principles to spin a story. Lazar had a good story, but lacked tangible paper trail.
Yeah.
And you make a good point, Jonathan, although I will say that the nature of that kind of work, the nature of black bag technological work, makes paper trails difficult. And I'm not saying Lazar is 100% on the level, because as you say, there are inconsistencies. He has claimed that, and I believe Corbell makes the claim that he's never tried to profit off his story, which is simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
His website, United Nuclear, they sell, I believe it's unitednuclear.com. They sell literally his UFO sketches, and mugs and shit. So, and I've heard that there was like a book deal or a TV deal that didn't work out at some point.
Mm.
So he's definitely tried to profit.
He's just not been good at it. That's what I would say.
Okay. Hey, me and Bob Lazar have something in common. We're both fucking weird and we're bad at making money.
Right. And I want to build off what Jonathan's saying is, this is a tough thing. And I've even wrestled with this because I find some of, some Lazar's claims to be compelling, but I'm also finding some holes. And this is a tough thing because you don't know. There's enough details there that maybe it's true. And if you want to believe it's true, you can start to fill in some of those gray areas and buy into maybe conspiracy theories that, the gaps in his educational background or these missing pieces or attempts to discredit him, right? You can lean into that and believe that. But at the same time, you can also find these holes and treat them as legitimate holes. And if you want to discredit him, you can go that route. And it's one of those things where I could see it being true and I could see it being completely fabricated. And it's really hard to tell with the information that we don't have.
That's it. And I think that's a nice segue into the reason he was actually being raided, the reason that was given, which is the police were investigating with the help of the FBI a murder.
Mm-hmm.
And now in December 2015, a woman named Janelle Sturzel from Houghton, Michigan, died. And according to the Mayo Clinic, she died of thallium poisoning. Now, thallium is, I don't know much about it. It's a chemical. It's very poisonous. Apparently, it was used in rat poison up until the 1960s. And Bob Lazar sells thallium. Now, Bob Lazar sells thallium in a stabilized state in discs. It's not, you can't buy the powder, which I think is called thallium sulfate, if I'm not mistaken, or sulfide. I can't remember which. He doesn't sell that. She was presumably poisoned with that. The discs that Lazar sells, which you can buy on his website now, they don't, you try swallowing it. I don't know how well it'll go. Don't do that.
No,
but she was poisoned with this. And I guess her husband had previously bought chemicals from Lazar. So according to the FBI, they put two and two together and they searched his office. And now it should be said, Lazar was very cooperative, apparently. He produced all relevant documentation right away. I will say it does seem overkill. The FBI raid, the amount of cast iron they put into proceedings seems out of sync with again what was being alleged. But I'm not in law enforcement, so I can't speak to that. I will say, though, what's interesting is there has been no further word on the murder of Janelle Sturzel. There has been, after 2017, there was one more mention in a local newspaper, and there is nothing. There's no obituary. There's no mention of her in news. And also interesting is that further south in Michigan, in Battle Creek, there was another thallium poisoning about 7 months later of a man who was poisoned. He hung on for a little while longer, but also eventually perished. Now, the police said that the two things were not related.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting I mean, it's, I have to assume thallium poisoning is not a common way to go. And, that they didn't kick down Lazar's door again is interesting to me. Also, that they had the two thallium poisonings and, they kicked down Lazar's door after. Like, it wasn't like they immediately did it following the murder of Janelle Sturzel. They did it after about a year and a half later. And some people think that is proof that they weren't necessarily looking for thallium. They were looking for something else. But the thing is, this is where conspiracy theory gets dangerous, right? Because you could just start making leaps.
Right.
And sure as shit doesn't mean they're right, and it's, going back to our buddy Joe Rogan. You can say shit all you want, doesn't mean it's true. And you can say, well, I'm just asking questions, but it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and when you look at kind of the surface level claims of the raid, I from my perspective, it does kind of make sense because if he's selling this kind of, and again, I'm not a chemist or I don't have a background in any of this, but if he's selling the version of this material thallium that is not in its current form usable for poisoning, but they want to find out if he has some of that, and maybe doing a raid is a way to check deeper into the records and into his inventory. And I was thinking about this as I watched the film again today. If they're looking for, as the Corbell would have you believe, element 115, I actually think like the search would be even deeper, bigger, more intensive, and
very likely, yeah.
I mean? We're talking military CIA level. We're bringing in, and I don't have a background in that either, but scanners. I just imagine it would be even more involved if they were really looking for this element that is of a secret level beyond Area 51. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I imagine like a little gray alien in a trench coat, like Seth Rogen from that movie, Paul, that Alien movie. He's got like a detective hat on. And he's walking around with a magnifying glass. That's what I'd like to think they would have done.
That's fair.
Okay. I said I'm not going to make ad hominem attacks on Bob Lazar or aliens or
right.
This is why I stopped drinking, Joseph. I'm a real bitch when I'm drunk. Very funny, but very mean. But anyways, it's tough, right? Because it's easy to dismiss it entirely. It's easy to say, well, the FBI raided because of the thallium thing, and certainly the murder of Janelle Sturzel is awful,
right?
And it doesn't sound like they're going to catch them, but I will say an alarming number of murders go unsolved.
Yeah.
My wife did as a research project for her degree. She did some research into unsolved murders across the U.S. There's raw numbers. It's pretty chilling. So, yeah, I don't want to start speculating on that, but I will say, just this idea that, or rather, I should say, I joke about aliens, but at the same time, the government has for years had investigations into these things. Again, not necessarily element 115, but just the concept of aliens, that world, and they have been, they've not been very forthcoming about it. In fact, there's a lot of things have actively said, no, that's bullshit. Why would aliens? Stupid. Right. UFOs. But they've been curious for a very long time. My stepfather, and I've said this on Ghost Story Guys before, my stepfather in the late 1960s was seconded to a special unit in the Canadian Air Force, whose primary or sole job rather was to interview commercial pilots who had witnessed UFO phenomenon. They were that interested back then.
Interesting.
At investigating these things. And like we said we're talking about the spooky stuff. I've got my notes here. ATIP has been around for 20 years. And some of the things that ATIP has collected information on are things that line up with what researchers were talking about in the 1970s. Guys like John Keel, who is probably my favorite researcher. You know, he talked about people seeing UFOs and then having actinic burns, radiation burns. This is backed up by documents by documents acquired through Freedom of Information requests. This is all, you know, this is a thing that's happened, but they've spent years going, no, you stupid morons. There's nothing in the skies. And that's not the case, you know. And even, I mean, one of my favorite saws is the remote viewing program. They had a remote viewing program in the government for 20 years. It had different names, but it was operated by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA. It kind of bounced around. It was called Grill Flame. It had a couple other names. I think it was Stargate when it finally finished. But it was in the U.S. government for 20 plus years. And for those of you who don't know, remote viewing is the notion that you can project your consciousness to places where you are not physically located in order to view them and like see them. And I have been to a conference for the international organization that organizes this. I have participated in remote viewing exercises. It works. And according to some people from that program, it was shut down in fairly recently. I don't remember the date, but it was shut down because they were told it was investigated by subcommittee. The subcommittee cherry-picked reports which showed it did not work and that it was a waste of money. But they were taken aside by a member of that subcommittee who told them, what you do is witchcraft. You are witches. We're putting a stop to this.
Sounds like American politics.
That was kind of my takeaway too.
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things about Lazar's accounts that I think are fascinating and compelling is they're kind of framed in this approach towards extraterrestrial technology that I think is quite realistic. Because when you think about why would from my perspective, the American government, right, be interested in a craft, it's because of its tactical threat and advantage. Think about the kinds of technology, propulsion technology he's talking about. He's talking about something that creates a gravitational field that manipulates gravity and kind of warps time and space, as he talked about, and then propels something that way. And then when you look at some of the declassified footage of aircraft and the way that they maneuver and stop on a dime and seem to violate the laws of physics, because if you or I in a craft that's under conventional propulsion that moves like that, we're getting crushed against the side of it. But something about
our
this
organs are
technology,
smoothies,
right? But apparently, something about this technology creates, as he has purported, creates this bubble that keeps that from happening. Now think of it in the terms of warfare, right? Think about the country that has vehicles, military vehicles that can do that is now the world power, hands down, unquestioned.
Oh yeah,
a fleet of 10 of those things with a field that allows you to maneuver that way, take out anything you want, right? So the idea that the military would be interested in these things, in particular for, can we create and be the first one to create this, whether it be from wanting to take over or just prevent someone else. I mean, we're living in a time of, with what's going on in Ukraine, and obviously that's a lot of tragic things going on beyond the scope of this conversation. But think about if a world power who has the intentions of what Russia has that kind of technology, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, have you ever read accounts of the first pilots in World War II to see German fighter jets, basically like German rockets? Apparently, it was fucking terrifying.
Okay,
because you're used to a particular, I'm in a plane. And it's very old. I assume they yell contact and they spin the propeller and wind up the elastic band and shit. And all of a sudden, these things are zipping through the skies at unfathomable speeds. That must have been just, again, like a shit your pants scary. So imagine
that to another level.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, so much of the 20th century was shaped by war, and I don't think people really necessarily get that. I mean, one, it's a depressing ass thought, but
right.
I was reading. Okay, it did actually have some validity. Hooray! Finally.
Yeah.
I started reading a book prior to the show called Raven Rock, and it's basically about how the U.S. government plans to continue operation in the event of a nuclear holocaust. And as someone who's not in America, I got bad news for you, Joseph. They just expect you to fucking die.
Great. Okay.
They have no plan for you guys. There's
Right.
it was actually figured sometime in the 60s that, there's no big good plan for civilians. So later, skater, we'll see you in hell.
Is Canada's plan better? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay, so
no. There's
nice knowing you too.
Yeah, what the hell? It was going to come anyways. It was either the cheeseburgers or the nukes that do me in, one of the two.
Right.
There's a bunker in Ontario that they called it the Diefenbaker bunker, after Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. I don't know if it's still operational, but it was built. You guys have an incredible array of fallout shelters, like government-built fallout shelters all across America. It's really fascinating shit. That would be worth a show all unto itself.
Interesting.
Because they built these places, like they dug out mountains. There's Raven Rock there. Actually, we mentioned Battle Creek. Battle Creek is home to a massive Cold War era bomb shelter. And these are not bomb shelters built like, my rich ass neighbor decides to build a bomb shelter in his basement. Apparently, those were about as good as the kid who used to come to my store and buy Mountain Dew because he thought it actually lowered his sperm count so he could have unprotected sex. Apparently, a lot of people used to think that was a thing. The backyard bomb shelters were about as effective as Mountain Dew.
Great.
And Ella says late to the party, and it's of course such a morbid but true topic. Yes, Ella. Yeah, you know me well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's scary, concerning stuff, no doubt. So, yeah, absolutely.
I'd get that in there. This way I can write off the $17 I spent on that fucking Kindle book. And Ella reminded me, if you're a patron of the Ghost Story Guys podcast, you get the audio version of this delivered to your inbox almost immediately after the show. So this way you can hear what we have to say. You don't have to necessarily look at our gorgeous beaming mugs. But I mean, I understand why you would want to. We're glorious, but it's hard to do it while you're driving unless you got a Tesla. But so getting back to Bob Lazar, one of my biggest problems with the film, like I said, I don't think it tells us anything new. And I think that's the biggest problem with most of Corbell's stuff. If he truly does have new information, it falls in that I cannot tell you for reasons category.
Right.
And good for him, but it doesn't do jack shit for me as an audience member. And by inserting himself into the story, he just seems kind of thirsty.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And a little bit, this goes back to kind of the genre of kind of paranormal docs in general. It kind of takes this approach of just finding all these details and stringing together and starting from the position of believing things and tying them together. And this documentary and kind of the Bob Lazar thing I feel like it's sort of been Corbell's meal ticket. So you described inserting himself in the documentary as a mistake. As an art form, it was a mistake, but as a career move, it probably wasn't. Because, because, and, you look at it like, he's made appearances on Joe Rogan. And for as much as, there's reasons to be critical of Joe Rogan's work. Joe Rogan's kind of the bro version of Oprah Winfrey, that if you get on his show, right, it's huge for your career, right? Whether like him or not. And so Corbell's been on there. And I think, he's tethered himself to Bob Lazar and George Knapp, and that trio, has really, kind of that connection has really been great for him, and it's been his meal ticket. So,
and I have respect for George Knapp as a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, to me, if he sees something in Corbell, there must be something to him. Mm-hmm. I just don't necessarily. I mean, his enthusiasm certainly, and based on what I've seen of those quantum jujitsu videos, he can whoop ass,
he'd kick our ass, both of us together at the same time. I mean,
this uneaten sushi by my left hand here, Joseph, that could kick my ass. Probably will later. It's quite spicy. Right. We have a comment from Jonathan. He says, Yellow 5. I remember that urban legend. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but I had a Google of that. I saw that come up a little bit earlier. Something about tartrazine. I do not know. I know that back in the 60s, there was that, was it red dye number 2? Was pulled. I think they used to be on red Smarties, as I recall. And red dye number 2 was turned out to be, or was discovered to be carcinogenic. So a lot of food products with red dye were pulled. and it was
Interesting.
reformulated. But anyways, but yeah, again, it's just going as far as the film's concerned, and really, I think we've kind of exhausted, the potential of the film because there's not a lot there. I like Corbell's enthusiasm, and I like the fact that he's out there making this stuff.
Mhm.
But I think that he suffers from that. Again, I think he wants to be part of the story. I think the fact he wants you to know, hey man, I got famous friends.
Yeah.
Look, I got the ghost of Mickey Rourke here talking about my movie. And I mean, Hunt for the Skinwalker. We talked about that on a bonus episode of Ghost Story Guys years ago. And at some point, Robbie Williams just turns up. He doesn't do anything. He's just there. And I'm here too. And I think, great. I don't know that does anything but distract me from the fact that there's piss all happening in this documentary. But I don't know. Again, I don't think he's made anything since this film. I think this is the last film he released. There was Patient 17, Skinwalker, and then this. So I don't know if he's done or if he just kind of ran out of steam or if he's got something else he's cooking up that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I think I've seen him, kind of on the interview circuit at points, and this is what 4 years since the film's been out. So
yeah,
I'm of the opinion again that Bob Lazar's been his meal ticket, and he's still kind of working the Bob Lazar circuit, and doing whatever he can, and kind of staying with the UFO thing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him. He was on Twitter today talking about something alien-y. So yeah, he's very much ridden that ridden, as you say, ridden that bus.
Well, and you think about it, he set this up, like the intro to it is for the whole kind of series this is supposed to be, right? The kind of what fantastic beliefs or not, whatever, I forget what it's called, but
I can't remember.
This is supposed to be part of a series, but he's kind of stalled out at this one. It feels like he had these aspirations to we'll do UFOs now, and then we'll do, I don't know, Bigfoot next, and we'll do something. But right. I feel like he caught this cash cow this Bob Lazar thing, and he's kind of sticking with it and kind of running with that a little bit more. But like the story is interesting, but I am with you. Like some of the creative decisions, it just feels like he's trying to show off his creative chops, and some of the editing styles and the Mickey Rourke kind of stuff. And there was potential. There's a good story there with Bob Lazar, a really interesting story. So there was a potential to do a really fascinating, concise kind of documentary without all that extra baggage, right? Oh, you're muted there.
There we go.
Yeah.
Jonathan explains. Okay, Mountain Dew has yellow 5, and that supposedly was what lowered the sperm count. I understand. Thank you, Jonathan. There we go. Again, Mountain Dew. It is not a contraceptive.
It's not your friend either.
No.
I used to drink that stuff. Yeah.
Oh. I love soda, man. That's my booze. Mm-hmm. I love soda, but it is, I gain weight immediately just thinking about it. I do want to say, just before we start wrapping it up, it seems like making movies is where researchers, it's like the siren's call. The siren call of Hollywood, and like for so many people, the siren's call just ends up with you busted up on the rocks or sunk in the ocean. I remember when David Paulides crowdfunded his first Missing 411 documentary. I contributed. I think I still have my t-shirt somewhere. I have a digital copy, and man, that broke him, mentally for a long time, because he just got so mad at the fact that, people are, Kickstarters are a fucking nightmare, because basically the second people give you money, they want their shit. They just expect the film to appear in their inboxes. And I know he was having a hard time with digital distribution, and people just jumped down his throat so hard. And it just felt like his quality of research started to suffer after that. And the film was not very good. The second one, the Hunters one, was better, but that first documentary was bad. And I don't know. It just seems like so many people they want to go that direction. They want to make movies. Your heart surgeon tells you, what I really want to do is direct.
Right.
But in the end, it just ends up crushing so many people, because I don't know. It just seems to be that's what it is. It's this machine kills dreams.
I think there's something about the nature of the medium of film as compared to the written word or even podcast that kind of drives in that direction. And it probably ties into kind of one of my critiques of Corbell's documentary here. If you're doing a written work, whether it be a book, a long form article on a topic, right? there's more, the nature of that medium is people tend to have longer attention spans and are more expectant that you're going to take your time to construct an argument and have there's not as much of a whiz bang shiny things draw, right? You can unpack your argument with time and do good research. Even with a podcast, it's a little bit more of a long form conversation. You can unpack an argument. But when you get into the film medium, I think there's such a pressure to do something that is entertaining and dramatic.
Sure.
And you almost start compromise. Well, not almost. You start to compromise the research in the interest of the narrative and the compelling medium. And I think that's what's happened here. I mean, they take the raid, which is an interesting footnote, but they almost completely bury the details of what the raid, was about with the thallium, and really frame it as something that maybe it was for 115, but they really lean heavily into that. And the story's compelling enough without some of that dramatic kind of infusion there. But I think when you're going film, it's just that pressure to create a dramatic narrative that compromises the research.
I think you're right. And Ella agrees, although she expresses it in a different way. She says, that's almost as funny, referring to Mountain Dew,
right,
as Red Bull having bull sperm in it. And I remember people I guess technically it does. Does it taurine? There's some like a common element. Something like that. Anyways, I don't know. I don't drink the stuff. I have enough anxiety without giving myself that in a can.
Right.
All right, so we're going to bring it in for a landing here. But before we do, I want to just open the floor. If anyone watching, if you have any questions, any comments, we'd love to see you. Or pardon me, love to hear from you. Drop them in the comments below. And in the meantime, Joseph and I will vamp and give you guys a second to collect your thoughts. I know you must be all hot and sweaty from seeing our... Oh, I can't keep it up. I'm a nightmare, Joseph. I'm a nightmare. I look like Mr. Potato Head left out in the sun. It's all very bad.
I look like Mr. Potato Head that was left in the closet, so I don't know how much better,
All right. James says, the thought just came to me, but if you want more on the background of the physique viewing program the government had, you should watch the Project Blue Book series. Okay. Yeah, I've heard that's good, the Blue Book series. I have not seen it. Actually, that's a great, thank you, James. That's a great reminder. I want to point you in the direction of people who know what the fuck they're talking about. And more than anything, I want to send you to Ryan Sprague's Somewhere in the Skies podcast. Ryan makes an incredible show. Ryan is very knowledgeable on the subject of ufology and a very, very interesting guy. Very sweet guy, too. Very nice person, which is unusual, I would say. When you've got someone who operates in like film and podcast and television and theater, usually they're kind of a tool. But Ryan is very cool and produces an extraordinary show. I also want to recommend Paul Bestel's Mysteries and Monsters. Paul's had a number of great UFO guests on recently. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she talks about a series of sightings in Wales, which are very dramatic and include the presence of military. And the military, man, they had some, we'll say, unlikely stories for why they were there. One person said, we're working with, I think, Vodafone. We're helping Vodafone put up some towers. And someone else just said, oh, no, we're doing something else. They couldn't get their story straight, but they were armed. And I don't know how dangerous 5G is, but apparently it necessitates an AR-15. So
that maybe those guys blocked, so
right? Maybe those guys blocking traffic in and out of my neighborhood were right. All right. D says, good to see you guys. We'll watch you for next time. Thank you. Hey, thank you, D. And yeah, you can always rewatch this on the Ghost Story Guys YouTube channel. Again, if you're a patron of Ghost Story Guys at $5 and above, you can listen to the audio stream. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. And Joseph, anything else to add?
I think we've kind of had quite a bit to discuss with Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell, and of course, our good buddy Mickey Rourke, right, who was really made that film, hands down, right?
I don't know what happened to Ronald McDonald, man, but he's looking rough. Went too many rounds with Grimace.
Apparently, and lost. So, yeah.
By the way, Mickey Rourke, I'm a fan. Don't hurt me. I'm just being an asshole. You have so much money. You don't need to come after me. Right. Go after Joseph. He has more to lose.
Right. Gee, thanks.
Well, I'm a coward, Joseph. What can I say?
That's fair.
All right. So, Joseph, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me at Twitter at ISO_ghosts, in search of ghosts, and then the YouTube channel In Search of Ghosts. Links should be below in the description of this video.
Perfect. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Largely the Truth. Of course, I'm the co-host of the Ghost Story Guys podcast. I'm also the host of Largely the Truth with Brennan and Storr and Book of the Dead. You can find me at ghoststoryguys.com, largelythetruth.com, and all those other. I can't think of anywhere else you'd possibly want to find me, but those that should get you there. In the meantime, we thank you so much for watching. We thank you for listening, for just hanging out with us. It's so wonderful having you guys here. We love talking about these things. Next week, or not next week, 2 weeks from now on Tuesday, we have, I believe, a proper horror film lined up, not a documentary. And I'm looking forward to talking about that because I actually quite like that movie that we're going to be talking about. So we shall see. But in the meantime, we're weird and you're weird. So why not be weird together? See you next time.